What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today working on the Prelude headlights again and picking up where things left off last time we touched these. Basically I was able to get the low beams to work, but was never able to get the high beams to work as well. So what has transpired since then is USR Auto has actually cooked up a little device, a little adapter that should allow these headlights to function with the Prelude. So there was some issue with polarity, or not really entirely sure. I'm not gonna say I 100% understand it, but what we have today is an adapter that they sent us to plug and play with the Prelude headlights that should hypothetically allow me to use my low beams and the high beams, which would be great because I got inspection coming up this month, so definitely right on time. So if you guys remember, we installed these. They are basically a full LED headlight with a bunch of individual LEDs, and the beam pattern for the low beam itself, and I'll turn it on in a second, but it's just illuminating these top ones and one middle one. And then the high beams is when the entire LED pattern is illuminated all at once. But if I go and just turn on the low beams, they are LEDs, so they come up to brightness right away. Doesn't take any warm-up time, and that's what they look like. So you can tell that the pattern is on point, I hope. Maybe if I go to the side there, yeah, you can kind of tell that the top ones and then one middle LED is illuminated. So we were good on this side, but if I go ahead and turn on the high beams right now, this is what happens. So nothing illuminates when the high beams are on, and I have to switch back to low beams. Now thus far it's been totally manageable driving with just the low beams because these LEDs are so much brighter than just the stock halogen things that were in there before. So I can't complain on that end, but it will be nice to have some functional high beams and low beams. Huge shout out to USR Auto for sending these out. They again are an adapter of sort to allow me to run these headlights with the stock plugs for the Prelude. So the only extra thing we're gonna have to do here is ground each of these. So you can tell that there's a ground wire with a little eyelid ring on the end that we're gonna have to ground these in order for them to work. So my only thing is now I need to disassemble the headlight housing again and try and find somewhere in the housing that I can hopefully ground that wire, because as you can tell it's maybe about 10 inches long, which when you're working with pop-up headlights, you don't have a lot of room to run wire. Just because they're constantly moving, or they do move up and down, you have to have everything tucked in a way that it's not gonna get tangled or snapped or broken when you use the pop-ups. If you guys haven't seen my other videos, when we disassemble these headlights to get the housing shrouds off, you just want to take a Phillips head, take that one out. There is two up top here. One actually way down there, you can see the groove they cut out, but way back in there, there's a Phillips head, and then also one on this side. Now that we've got the housing shroud taken out, you can tell that we've got a little bit more room to work here, but again, we're gonna have to continue taking out more screws so we can get this bulb out. And you'll notice that there's some smaller Phillips heads, one here, and then that one that I was talking about that's down there. You can either take it off before you take the shroud off. I prefer to just take it off afterwards just because it gives you a little bit extra room. One heads up while I actually have this, so you can tell I've actually got like some duct tape here and a bolt that doesn't really look like it belongs there. It's holding in this metal bracket on this side because this metal bracket snapped when I put in my old headlights, so it didn't really fit too great, and now I have to jerry rig something to make this fit, but you can't really tell once the shroud's on. But just a heads up, be careful when you're working with this piece of metal. It's pretty flimsy, and if that weld breaks, you're gonna be in the same situation I am. And I dropped it. That sucks. I've now gotten this metal shroud off, and the headlight housing, or the headlight itself, is loose, so it should just kind of pop out like that. And you can tell back here is where we've got the factory connector. I had to do some splicing last time to try and orient this in order to get it to work, but fortunately it wasn't too successful. When we disconnect this plug here, we'll have the OEM connector. Basically, I'm gonna plug one of these into the OEM side and then one of these into the LED side, and then again just ground this little wire here. My one concern for this job is finding a place to ground the wire, and because it's a mobile headlight so it moves up and down, I can't just go and like say drill a hole back there, put a screw in it and let it do that, because if this cable gets too much tension on it, it's gonna rip it off or even snap the wire in half, which would not be good. So what I need to do now is try and find maybe somewhere where I can either drill a hole to put a bolt in just to ground this, or if you look right back there, there's a bolt barely that I'm pointing to that I think I might be able to use as a ground, and it's part of the headlight so it'll move with the LEDs and therefore not stretch it out. Quick update, so just plugged the headlight in and with the new adapter and nothing seemed to work, even though I was touching it to like a ground spot that I could effectively make it work temporarily, and nothing illuminated. So what I think is going on is USR designed that with the OEM adapter in mind, and as I said before, when I first got these headlights I had to do some rewiring in hopes that we could get it to work. So what I think I'm going to do now is swap this back to its original orientation, so that way when I plug, everything will line up hopefully, and then everything should work. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the negative terminal on the battery, that way I don't electrocute myself, and rewire these, and then I'll catch up with you guys when we're ready to plug it back in. I was able to get this light to work actually. So what I did was I had to go back to the stock orientation on the plugs for the OEM side of that cable that I showed you guys. So I just had to basically match up the color. I think it was a red one, a green one, and a white one. So just color matching at that point. And then I was able to get at least temporary ground to at least check them out. I'm just basically looking into the housing, and if you look right there, I've got the temporary ground set up just to make sure that these work. So let me go ahead and turn on the low beams. Again, this side isn't wired up correctly yet, so it's not gonna work right, but this side is. So you can tell that the high beams and the low beams work, and the high beams are actually really, really bright. So like I said before, we were missing this function, and without that, it wasn't illuminating all of the lights, which it is now. And actually with everything wired up the way it is, this is kind of a good example. So there's the low beam pattern, correct? And then there's the high beam pattern. So what I need to do next is, again, change the wiring back to the OEM orientation, plug in that one, and then just officially ground those wires. So I'm gonna probably spend some time actually, I'm not 100% that bolt I will be able to use. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and figure out how to ground these, and I'll catch up with you guys when I'm ready to put them all back together. Another update. I backed that screw out entirely and took the wire brush on the drill and some acetone to get all of that rust and paint off of the bolt. That way we have a nice clean ground there, and it's basically just pinched right in between those two nuts, and then I sunk it back into that hole so that way it's not going to go anywhere. And I just checked and everything still works, so all I need to do now is find a way to kind of, I don't know, orientate and mount all of this stuff, so that way it's not really getting crunched when I'm using the pop-up headlights. I think what I'll probably end up doing is trying to zip tie it somehow to the back side of this black thing here, because the light itself takes up most of this space, and then you have some room right up here in between the top of this and the back to put some stuff. So I'm gonna try and figure that out now. Guys, got it done finally. Took a little bit, and now it's actually starting to rain. The sun is starting to go down, although the camera does a pretty good job in the low light. Sometimes, not always. But let me go ahead and turn these on to just the low beams first. So right now it's just set to the low beams, and you can tell that they're both working. Looks pretty good. Nice even line. I'm gonna go ahead and take the car for a drive once it gets a little bit darker, so that way you guys can see the beam pattern. And here's the high beams, which are extremely bright. I mean, you can already see them, but now they both work entirely. They're extremely bright. You can tell it's starting to rain a lot now. Yeah, it's gonna be too bright to even show you guys, but take it for granted, they are both all fully lit and now working functionally and now working well. So yeah, now you can see that they are all illuminated. It's starting to rain now, so I'm gonna go ahead and button everything up and then wait till it gets a little bit darker to take you guys out and show you what it looks like at nighttime.